Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I won't talk in French. I could. So today I'm going to talk about visualization and especially visualizing dynamic networks. So this presentation has basically three parts. The first part, I'll give you a glimpse of what we've done in the previous years, and then I'll show you what we've done recently, and then a small point on visualization literacy. So first, I have to say that I'm a researcher in France at INRIA, leading a research group called InfoVis, and it's a very nice setting. So I invite you, if you come by Paris, to come and visit us. We have a lot of fun doing a lot of nice research with whole-size display or physical visualization. It's really nice. So today, as Katie already started, you've seen that social networks are everywhere in, well, analysis of sciences, but basically in the connected world. So social network is basically a graph structure, and if you're a mathematician, you know what a graph is, except there are a lot of things that are associated with the graph, edges, and vertices, and the graph itself. So it's an augmented graph, and usually I call those augmented graph networks. And so I'll be talking about this problem of visualizing networks. So here, Katie showed a very similar example. Whoa, go away. This is the Facebook network, and visualizing network, that's a social network. Visualizing network is great because it gives you a very nice picture first, in this case, and it gives you a glimpse of the communication or relations between the different parts of the world. But then the question becomes, what do you learn from that visualization? Are you only showing what everybody was expecting, or are you showing more than that? Are there unexpected things coming from these visualizations? Are you learning something? And I'd say yes, we learn a little bit. So we have everything as expected. The communication channels flow from United States to Hawaii, from United States or North America to Europe a lot. So we have all these patterns that are very visible. There are a lot of activities in most of the continent. But what's interesting to me in this map is not what you see, but what you don't see. And what you don't see is a big part of the world. So I guess you already have seen those pictures. So can someone tell me what's surprising, what's missing in this picture? So Russia and China are missing. Those are not small parts, huh? Those are big parts. And to a slower extent, Brazil is partly missing too. So do you have any explanation? Why is China missing?
They have their network, Facebook?
Not only that, but also they filter Facebook. Facebook is forbidden. But they have their own. I mean, that's the counterpart. So for Russia, what's the explanation?
They have it too.
I guess that, yeah. I think they don't have much internet actually connected all over the country too. And for Brazil, any explanation? They play football? No. No more. But that was before. No, actually, they are using another social network called Okrut. So at that time, they were not visible on Facebook. So this map is interesting, not for what it shows, but what it doesn't show, which is interesting. It doesn't completely fit our expectation of the map of the world. Still, it's kind of crowded. And so my enemy is the hairball. So right now, what we see when we talk about visualization of large network is basically a huge hairball. And I hate it. It doesn't show anything useful. I mean, people pretend it's useful. I pretend it's not. So this is my LinkedIn network displayed as generated by LinkedIn. So you get a QR code, you can get it too. So it's all wrong. First, it's too dense. Second, it's an ego network, meaning that it shows everybody I am connected to. And I am in the center. So why am I in this network at all? Because I am connected to everyone. So this is a prior information. It's just adding one link for every of my collaborators. This link being completely useless because by definition, it's an ego network. So I'm connected to everyone. So first, there are 500 and so maybe 600 lines that are useless because they just connect everyone to me, when by definition, I am connected to everyone. And then finally, these kinds of networks don't grow well. They are not understandable when they become dense and large. And that's a sad fact. And my claim today is to explain to you that if you want to explore and analyze network, you should not, I repeat, you should not use this representation. If you do use this representation, you will be hurt by a lot of problems due to the artifact of this representation, which will give you very bad ideas of what's going on really in the network. So, for example, created by Cathy a couple of years ago in 2004 with her group of students. This is a social network of co-authorship for the information visualization conference. That was a contest that I created with Catherine Plaisant at that time. And it showed the map of the main researcher in information visualization. So each point is a person. The size is the number of papers they published. The darkness depends on the number of citations. So the darker, the more citation they have. And so each time they publish a paper with another author, then there is a link with that author. And the more they publish with an author, the bigger the link. So in this nice picture, you have a nice map of the InfoVis authors in 2004. You can see that Ben Schneiderman is here, is probably the most active has written the largest number of papers, but he's also one of the most cited researcher. And then there is this set of three people with George Robertson, Sue Card, and Jock McKinley. They were at Park for a long time, and they collaborated a lot. But they also collaborated with Ben Schneiderman, actually. And then you can see all the different groups of people collaborating. And this group, which is centered with John Stasko, actually is disconnected from the rest. So there is a European one by Daniel Keim. I think Keim is here. And it's also disconnected from the network, etc. So this map is great. It shows you a nice explanation of how people interact in information visualization. But is it a true map, or is it some simplified version? Actually, it's a simplified version. When you load a real data set, it comes like that, because a lot of people are connected. There are a lot of people who just appear once or twice. And so maybe Cathy can give us a couple of words about it, but she has been working quite a lot in order to clean up this network, to remove a lot of connections and a lot of people who are the tail of the social network, the tail meaning that they only published 1, 2, or 3 papers, and so much less than the others. And in order to create this map and make it understandable, she removed some people. And you're not aware that she removed people. So this map is not the data. This map is an... Yes. So, Cathy, you're here. Go ahead.
So, fortunately, all that data that went into the contest was publicly available online. So what we did is to put the data on the website and to explain in detail every single step that led to that one. And those who are interested can find that web page still after 10 years. Replicability, so you can go through the same steps and get to that one again.
Exactly. So she has explained everything. Also, it's not on the map, but it's explained. It's a very good idea. So my claim is to say that at that time she removed me. I was only had 3 or 4 publications. Now I'm the main publisher at this conference, so I should be number 1. And this was a choice that she has made explicitly at that time, which happens to basically be a bad predictor of what happens now. So my claim is to say that, yes, when you manage the data before you publish it, basically you make some choices those are private choices. Those choices are not in the data. And this can mislead people for understanding the map. This is one of the problems. So the reality is that usually when you have this map, the data, and you load it, you have something really messy. So today I will be talking about another representation for networks, and this representation is called an adjacency matrix. So basically, there are two very standard representations for network. The one that you know is this one. It's called a node link diagram. And the other one is an adjacency matrix, and it's here. And the way it works is extremely simple. So each of the points here, so those are airports. Each of the points here, the vertices, become line and columns. So each airport here becomes a line and a column. And each time there is a connection between two airports, you have a point at the intersection of the line and the column. So it's a table. The table contains lines and columns. And each time there is a connection, then you put a cross. So here, this small network here is the same as this adjacency matrix here. So the information that is available on the adjacency matrix is absolutely identical to the information represented by the node link diagram. But there is a benefit to the adjacency matrix. If I ask you, is this city capital connected only to Chicago, or is it connected to other airports? Maybe it's connected to Dallas and Norfolk because there is this line going through. Well, the answer is difficult because there are lines going all over the place. And this one is simpler than others. If I'm asking you for Milwaukee, you will have a hard time understanding. So on the node link, on the matrix, you just look at the line here, and it crosses the Chicago line with just one dot. So there is actually only one connection from capital to Chicago, and there is no other connection from capital to anything else. Okay. So here, there is no crossing. You can read. And so my point is to say that this representation allows to see both group level connections, but also individual connection with no mistake. So you can look at groups and you can look at individual. Of course, there is some magic out of it. You need to order the line and the column in the right way in order to see high-level patterns. So for example, yes, Chicago is connected to everybody here. Okay, so actually this line of work that I'm presenting today started in 1999, I think, with Mohamed Ghaniam, PhD student, when we had pretty dense networks and we wanted to visualize them. So we started from that network and trying to make sense of it, and it's kind of complicated. And then we use the adjacency matrix and a simple reordering, and we say, whoa, here we see a structure. Actually, it's a conference site. There is a conference every year. There are sessions and there are authors, and then there are some web pages that are shared among the years. And when it's well reordered, you can see that those pages are shared among all the web pages, and then those are the small clusters that correspond to each year's conferences. So we sent a paper to a conference saying, hey, good, this thing seems to be very effective for looking at networks of any kind of density. And we get rejected saying, prove it. So for us, it looked like a good proof, but actually it was not. So we did it. We proved it. What we did is we did a controlled experiment. So a controlled experiment is something you do in psychology usually, but we do it also in human-computer interaction. So we created random networks. So random networks have no meaning. They are just random, from different sizes and different densities. So this is the random network with points called A, B, C, D. And this is exactly the same with an adjacency matrix, no reordering at all. And then we ask questions to people. Is A connected to B? Is A and B connected only through C? Is there, how many connections can you see? So we ask several of the questions. And then we measure the time to answer and the number of errors it took people to answer when we were varying the size and the density. Okay? And we did that to a lot of people. And then the result that came was extremely clear. When the network density increases, the time and number of errors increases a lot with node link diagrams, And it goes to basically wild guesses when the density becomes high for node link diagrams. Whereas for adjacency matrices, whereas it's slower when the graph is sparse and small, when the graph becomes larger and denser, then the time does not increase by much, and the number of errors does not increase by much either. So the adjacency matrix is always better for every task. Those were simple tasks, actually. For every simple tasks when the networks become denser or bigger. So we published that, and it got accepted. And I had, for 10 years, I had people coming to me saying, I don't believe it. Some people were telling me that dense graphs don't exist, which is kind of funny, because dense graphs do exist. And so this is actually something you can control. And there were several experiments that replicated that one in order to show that it was wrong, but it's not. So the adjacency matrix is more effective when the graph becomes dense and or large. That's what it shows. So you would think, okay, let's use a matrix instead of a node link diagram all the time. But actually, the landscape is a bit more complicated than that, because the node link diagram has still a lot of advantages. So first, when the network is pretty sparse, then the node link diagram is much easier to understand. Everybody is familiar with it. So you don't want to use a node link matrix when you have a sparse network. So the node link diagram is very familiar. You don't have to explain anything to anyone. It's more compact, usually, than the matrix. When you have path-following tasks and the network is not too dense, then the node link diagram is better. But when the network becomes too dense, it's unusable anyway. So there are some good reasons to use node link diagrams. The matrix, as I said, is effective and has a lot of advantages, but it's much less familiar. It uses more space, especially when the network is sparse, because there is a lot of white space. And there are tasks that it doesn't support extremely well, like path following. And it requires actually some ordering in order to be well displayed, to show high-level things. So we've been working a lot. So yeah, again, I'm not trying to say don't use node link diagrams at all. They look good. And once you have made a work like Cathy Börner did in order to understand why you should remove some nodes and why you should remove some connections, so when you can do an analysis work, then in the end, to present your result, using a node link diagram is much more effective. So for presenting your work, in the end, you can use a node link diagram because everybody understands it and it looks nice when it's not too dense. But before you get to this very nice and clean representation and you want to explore, then for exploration, the matrix is much more effective because you read the network, you reorder it, you display it, and it always works and it's always readable. So on the left side, you have the counterpart, exactly the same network, but using a matrix, and we can see actually the same. We can see the same pattern. So this pattern here means that there are a lot of connection. It's basically this one. Then you can have the big lines here are people who are very connected. This is Ben Schneiderman, who's connected to several people here. So you have those two subclusters, which are basically those two, I think. And so when you are trained, you can read very effectively the matrix. It needs some training. So somebody has to explain to you how it works and how to read it. So as I said, this is what we call a click. Everybody is connected to everybody else. So clicks are okay for everyone. When the click is complete, it's okay. But when the click is almost complete, imagine I miss one connection here. You can't see it. If there is one missing connection here, this is a click with two missing connections that are here. You can clearly see them because there are two missing dots. It's not a perfect square. So you see the missing links. And again, I was pointing for the first example. Seeing the missing links is as important as seeing the existent links. Okay. So here, these points are basically connectors. They connect two clicks or two groups. And those connectors are usually those cross patterns. You can recognize them easily. So you need to learn how to read these matrices. But when I say learn, I don't mean you have to spend 5 years learning. It's not like reading. It's about 10 minutes, so I explain it to you in 1 minute. Then you have to look at several matrices. Then after 10 minutes, you know how to do it. Maybe 1 hour is necessary in order to be used to get it. So I don't mean a heavy-duty, long, painful learning, just like learning how to bike. It's like 10 minutes to 1 hour. So if you want to analyze networks, I think it's kind of a cheap price to pay. And then you can learn as dense matrices as you want. So then comes the problem of reordering the matrices. There's been a lot of work on the reordering in many sites. So the idea actually has been explained by Jacques Bertin in the 60s, actually. Jacques Bertin explained that when you have a table, it's the same for a matrix, but the table works the same. So this is a production of meat by country. Okay, so there are several countries here, several kinds of meats, and there, at the intersection, you have the number, the production for a year. Using this table, so like an Excel spreadsheet, you can answer any question, any individual question. What is the production of France for beef? So you go to bovin, you go to France, and you reply 37. But if you want to have a higher level view of that pattern of production, what you can do is you can basically put next to each other the countries and the production that are similar in profile. And instead of using just number, use bars, so just bar charts, when the bar is proportional to the production. And so this is what has been done. And you can understand that there is no problem in permuting two entries. If I change the order of France and Luxembourg in this chart, it doesn't change the meaning at all. It just changes the placement. But the meaning is exactly the same. So here, this is the reordered table. And in this reordered table, I can clearly see that not only I can read the detail, but I can only see that there are actually 3 patterns here. There are pattern A, B, and C. So Germany and the Netherlands have the same production pattern, more pork than beef, than horses, for example. Belgium or Luxembourg are about flat, and France and Italy is the contrary. So there are 3 patterns. And this is what I call higher level visual representation, because you can look at high level trends, and then you can also look at the detail. So a good ordering of the table or of the adjacency table will allow you to not only answer to a specific question, but also to look at trends and global trends. So there are several algorithms. I won't go into detail. That's not what's interesting here. The interesting part, we're working still on a survey on that, is that the algorithm comes from every direction, biology, graph theory, etc. So the way we do it is actually we try to put similar patterns next to each other, meaning that if a vertex is very similar to another one, we want to put them close to each other. But so we could use only the connectivity pattern, 0, 1, but that's not as rich as using what we call the distance matrix. So we use a distance matrix, which shows for everyone the distance to every other ones, and we reorder to have the vectors and the lines be as similar as possible when they are close by. So we have several publications on that, but that's just the technical point. We also work with a lot of researchers, so basically sociologists and historians, and we've done a lot of participatory design session with them in order to understand what kind of analytical tasks they are doing on network and what do they want to see and how do they want to work. And that in order to create some nice systems, visualization system to help them. And it turned out that, for example, this historian, Claire Lemercier, is actually drawing matrices in order to compare different networks over time. So that's not completely unheard of. So just to be clear, so from this very simple idea of using adjacency matrices showing that they are more effective, then we've done a lot of research on trying to improve those adjacency matrices to be more usable by people like you and even me. So I'll go very fast because then I will talk about the dynamic ones. So first, we've put the two representations next to each other, the node link diagram, the matrix. And the idea is that the users can basically click on one side and see what it means on the other side, or vice versa. They have the two representations next to each other, which helps them learn. Problem is if you want to use that with a fairly large network, you need basically two large screens. And you spend all your time switching from one screen to the other, which after a couple of minutes is very tedious. Still, it works and it's kind of useful, but it's very tedious. Then with Nathalie Henry, we worked on integrating the links into the matrix. So here you see on the border, you have links and you see the matrix. And actually with interaction, you can see what is the shortest path from one point to the other. So you click, you select one, you move the mouse, and it shows you the shortest path. So this is actually the shortest path from one to the other, goes from this one and then that one. So we added interaction to that. We show that this presentation with augmented links was much more effective than any of the representation without the effective links. Then with Nathalie and Michael McGuffey, who's actually here in Montreal, we also created a hybrid representation. And the idea is when you have this same network, like the collaboration network, you can display it as a node link diagram, but then you will have those very heavily connected areas. And these heavily connected areas are impossible to read, so you replace it with a small matrix of only these people. And this makes a hybrid representation where you have those small matrices connected by normal lines, and so you can have two levels of reading of the network. So let me show you how fun this can be to analyze social networks using this hybrid visual representation. So this article dates from 2007, actually, so it was 7 years ago. So you can start with a node link diagram, that's a possibility, and when you select several nodes, then they become a small matrix, and you can choose several options like sizes. So you see the way to do it is extremely simple. And I would argue that doing that is part of the exploration. And by part of the exploration, I mean that when you manipulate interactively your network, you get a very deep understanding of the network, and you ask yourself several questions that are very important. So you can see that when you select a small group, it gets transformed into a matrix, but it goes through some animation. We are very strong in doing this kind of animated transition. This animated transition is extremely important when you work to understand that you're not changing all of a sudden what is there, but you see that there is a relationship between the thing before and the thing after. So this is an example of what I mean by when you work with your network. So in that particular case, you may wonder, there is this particular person, is he part of that group, or is he in between the group? This happens all the time for real social networks, where you have one researcher who worked 15 years in research group A, then 15 years in research group B. So which group does he belong to? A, B, both, in between? So that's a very interesting question to ask. And interaction is very powerful for raising those questions and discussing them with other people. So we have a nice interface that can be used with a pen, and that's fine. I mean, so you get the idea, and you can work with the matrices or etc. So I'll skip there. So now you see we've got this representation which is And of course, we can abuse it. We can create color for everything, etc. Then it becomes a Christmas tree. As I said in the beginning, I'm not a fan of very heavy loaded colorful things because I think they are not useful for exploration. But this representation has really a lot of benefits in the sense that you can see every node, you can count every node's degree, you can follow every link from the source to its destination, you don't get any aggregation, you can identify clusters and outliers, and you can see a lot of really nice details. You can see interesting visual patterns. So I'll just explain to you quickly what we can see in terms of visual patterns. So those are really collaboration. So this pattern that you see here, you have a professor here, and here you have the students. This is typical. The students only work with the professor, and the professor only work with the students in that case. So that's a very standard one. Ben Schneiderman has the same, Catherine Plaisant has the same. It's interesting. And then at the middle you have Park. Park was not a university. Park, you had researcher paid for a high salary, and they had to produce a lot of research. So they had to collaborate. So here you see that there are basically 3 groups of researchers, and those 2 collaborate quite a lot. And so you have this idea of more collaboration. Berkeley is split in 2. There is this one which actually has a bit like a professor-style collaboration, and this one, it's two groups who collaborate a lot. So you don't need to have this kind of pattern in university, but most of them do. And then you have Steve Roth. And Steve Roth is special. He has both patterns. He has been working with a lot of students, and then he's collaborating a lot. Actually, he created a company. And when he created a company, he continued to publish. And so at that time, he was publishing with a lot of collaborators. Okay. So again, with a little bit of training, you can very quickly understand those simple patterns and more complex ones. And they are very telling, actually. Okay. So I did that for INRIA's network, all the INRIA, all their collaboration. I've been forbidden to show it to the public because it reveals too much that even INRIA doesn't control. It's changing now, and well, yes, we have it's coming back again. But I can tell you that this visualization reveals a lot of things. Like, for example, in one group, there are 2 subgroups that never publish together. That's really bad for an institution to show that. So now that they've seen it, they are asking these groups to collaborate more. We also worked on scalability, so we can go to millions. With these things. So that was the first part. And so this basically shows that you can go a long way for static networks with matrices, and then you understand why we use matrices, because they are more effective for exploration. Of course, we are not the only one in our group to work on that. In other work by other groups like IBM or University of Constance, on the use of matrices. But more recently, on the 9th of May, a student of Benjamin just defended his thesis on using matrix cubes for exploration. He was co-advised by Emmanuel Pietriga and myself. So here again, the problem becomes more complicated, because when you have networks evolving with time, then you add one more dimension, which is time. So you have not only topology but time. So one way to solve that has been in the past to, for example, use what we call small multiples. We use for each time step a network. We put them each next to each other, and then you let people try to make sense of this network. So those are trades between countries in Africa. So when you have 2 countries nearby and you want to compare their trade pattern, you can look at them. They are close by, and if they are not too dense, you can see something. But then when the pattern becomes too cluttered and evolves, then it becomes much harder to compute in your head the difference between 2 adjacent countries. And if you want to compare 2 non-adjacent countries, it's almost impossible. So the small multiple have a real problem. There's been other work by Ives in 2001 to use animation to show dynamic networks. So animation looks good. It's very appealing, but there's been couple of studies by psychologists that show animation is pretty bad in terms of analytical tasks. And the reason is that if you want to compare time step at 1 second to time step at 34 seconds, the only way to do it is to rely on your memory. And your memory is extremely bad when you have a new network coming every second. So it doesn't really work so well, but it shows something about the evolution of a network still. So for some tasks, it's still useful, but not for all, especially for comparison over long periods. Time. Other people have used the third dimension to show the network. So here, each vertex is kind of a pillar. The pillar grows, and then the connections are shown by some layers year after year or time step after time steps. It works okay, but just like any video games, you need navigation in order to look at the 3D network, and there are a lot of occlusion due to 3D. So occlusion is difficult, and navigation is also difficult for analytical tasks, but it's kind of... So there's been a lot of recent work on looking the time left to right and the topology just one dimension, but this is very confusing for the topology. Special work for ego network, but ego network are just one kind of network, or aggregating the time evolution inside the nodes themselves, but then the nodes are becoming very small, so it's difficult to read them, but still it can be useful for some examples. So here's the problem. We have a network that evolves over time. We want to make sense of it, but there are so many ways to look at this network, and none is really showing you the whole truth about the dynamic network. They all show you a snapshot about evolution over time or animation, etc. And so what we want is we want people to be able to explore the network and look at all of these facets of the network all at once. So how can we do it? Is there a way? So Benjamin came up with this idea of unfolding dynamic network. Unfolding is a metaphor, actually. Just like you open a box, you unfold a box, and you have several ways of unfolding a box. And Jaak van Wijk has shown that you can also unfold the Earth. And unfolding the Earth shows a lot of very different perspectives on the Earth. And all of these perspectives are useful. So this is just a way you take the Earth and you cut it different ways to show different things. So sometimes you want to cut them to see mostly the continents. Sometimes you want to see mostly the seas. Sometimes you want to have equal distances as much as possible. So all of those ways of cutting the Earth to unfold it make some sense for some particular question. This is going too fast for you, right? You can look at the video in a slow-down fashion. But here, the point is to say that all of these projections have been explored by geographers. They all make sense, and you can animate them, all of them, of course. You can unfold the Earth in a lot of different ways for different reasons. So you need a lot of different ways to explore the Earth to get a good sense of it. So, for example, this one on the left cuts it to see the continent clearly. This one on the right shows you the seas clearly. So this one cuts inside the sea. This one cuts inside the continent. So depending on if you are working on one or the other, they are useful. And so here the metaphor is the same. We want to be able to explore networks, dynamic network, by unfolding it through several dimensions, all of them being useful, and still having a pivot representation, a pivot mental representation for users to be able to relate all the views together. Because if you don't have a central mental representation, then you will give to the users 200 different representations, and they'll have to keep in their head the relationship from one to the other, which is extremely tough, almost impossible. So, for example, this is a social network evolving over time. This is a small multiple using matrices. So the way it's done is, the way we do it is basically we stack all together and we create a 3D view representation where the nodes are just like in a adjacency matrix using 2 dimensions, and the time uses a 3rd dimension, and the connection is just one point, one cell of this matrix. And we use interaction in order to explore that, and we can unfold it in several useful ways. The point is, this is not a 3D visualization in the sense that we don't want to say to people, use the 3D representation. It's there, but that's not the purpose. purpose is this representation is a pivot representation to switch from one view to the other. Parfait. J'ai entendu, j'ai vu. Look at it in this website. You can explore interactively the connectivity. And so here, this is a social network. So you see on the top left that there are some people who collaborate much more than others, and you can explore it. But the main strength is that you can, at any point, change and ask for different views, so different facets of the network that are easy to relate to the main one. So this small widget allows you to change and to look at, this is, for example, a front view. The front view shows you the network and aggregates the history on each of the cells. And you can play with it to change transparency, and you can see superimposed all the patterns over time of connectivity. Then you can click and you can open one in the middle to look at more details if you want. So you can just play with it as if it were a 3D cube. You can change the coding, of course. And you can play, and really this is the point, to have in mind this 3D cube and to imagine operation on this 3D cube. So now you can look at the time. And here it shows you the connectivity between people across time. And so you can see that, for example, the number of connections have increased across time. Or this is going back to the traditional one. And you can explore also filtering on the background, on the times, how it works. You can also basically explode it using small multiple. This is another view. And you can compare different parts and see the evolution. And you can see that there are some similar patterns and some different patterns. You can go back or switch to the time small multiple. And we have validated it with experts in two different areas. One is astronomy. So with the ALMA telescope is a new telescope in Chile, which is a radio telescope. And the radio telescope has 66 antennas connected to get nice pictures of the sky. And in order to tune the telescope, they have to look at the interferences or the connection between them, the 64 antennas. And these things has to be as even as possible, as gray as possible. And here, what the experts have seen is that there are some spots that are not gray at all. And you can look at the details and see why and where are the problems to then go into the physical telescopes and try to see where the problems are. So for him, it was the first time he could have a look at his data as a 3D networks evolving with time. There was no other tool for doing that. He could have cuts, but he couldn't see it overall in a nice way. Then we've been using it also for brain connectivity with somebody from McGill actually here and Paris. So the brain connectivity problem is with EEG or other ways. You can have connectivity or you can have correlation between different parts of the brain. And this becomes also a network, and the network evolves over time, and you can ask people to do some cognitive task or other kind of tasks. And you can see the correlation between several parts of the brain. And this is what it shows. So this is, again, the evolution of the connectivity pattern of the brain over time. And again, we've asked experts to use it, and they've been pretty effective at using it, and they liked it. just my conclusion is that, as you've seen, the research on network visualization has evolved a lot in the last 10 years or 14 years. And there are new visual representations that are much more effective for exploration than the standard noding diagram. But they require a little bit of training. We can display a very large network, and we can look at now networks that are dynamic. They are not integrated into publicly available packages yet. Also, we distribute some of our work. It will come, I'm sure. So we want to basically get that out prototype and work on different ways. But one of my main points here is to say that visualization needs more visualization literacy. As I said again, the standard representation for noding diagram is great, nice, beautiful, whatever, but it's not effective. So if you want to explore a real network, you need to use representation that are not as easy to read as the standard noding diagram. And people need to understand that if they want to understand complex data, and they do want to understand complex data, and you want to look at them, then they probably will need to learn visual representation that are not as simple as the bar chart that they see every day. They need to spend a bit of time. And by a bit of time, I mean 10 minutes to 1 hour. So it's not like I don't want people to go through 5 years of training. But it's very important to get it. So we've been working on the problem of visualization literacy. We have some ideas on how to improve it, but that's a social problem, and we need to address it. So the problem of the sub-problem of visualization literacy is this problem that people don't need some training, need to understand that with that training, they'll be able to understand much more complex data set, but they cannot skip that small training phase, and it's not magic. Visualization is not magic. I hope it were magic, but it's not. So it will need some training. Okay, that's all for today, and I hope you have questions.
Who's going to get to the microphone first?